Another, very, very specific to the mattress industry, is trying to reduce quilting transition waste. So whenever you transition from one pattern to another, you've got to cut out the middle section. How wide is that middle section that you cut out and throw in the, in this case, they didn't have an outlet for recycling, so it had to go into landfill waste. How wide is that? Well, what made this successful? They identified the wasted material. When they were doing a waste audit, they actually were looking in their bin going to landfill saying, well, what's left? And they saw a lot of it was actually quilting transition waste. So they record some data. Let's pull all that out. How wide is it? And how wide should it be? And from that, they defined what good looks like. So I have two examples on the side here. And they went pattern by pattern and said, ideally, the transition for the top pattern should only be 12 inches. Well, they're finding 17-inch waste and 21-inch waste in the trash can. So they're like, okay, here's an opportunity. This other pattern, however, that can get down to 8 inches. If everything lines up, if the operator's very deliberate about how they blend in that transition. So they really, in a useful level of detail, define what good looks like. And then from that, they created work instruction. It was very visual. It was, you know, a board where worker could easily look at, okay, I'm about to do this pattern. Target is 10 inches of transition waste. Okay, I need to plan ahead. And that visual instruction was also a reminder that this is important. This is a way for us to save money and reduce our environmental impact. And then they continued to record data. So they're like, how are we doing? And at this point, there are two ways that could have gone. One is you see what happened and what should have happened, and then you grab a big hammer and you beat the operator over the head. You say, oh, not good enough, not good enough. They took a different approach, and instead they celebrated successes. So when things did happen well, they're like, okay, good job here. You know, we were able to reduce our waste by 5% this week. And then the next week, good, we made it up to 6%, 7%. Eventually, they got up to 15% reduction. You know, they're in ideal, if the operator was absolutely perfect every single time, they'd be hitting about 28% waste reduction. So they're still on the way there, but they're doing it from an encouraging standpoint instead of a punitive standpoint. I think that was really crucial to them being able to keep the effort going and sustain it beyond the initial launch. So again, zooming out, what can we take away from this? One is just to identify a variable waste. One way, so backing up, when I was at Toyota, one of my senseis, one of my teachers, told me that the hardest part about reducing waste isn't figuring out how to change a process to reduce waste. It's walking by the same waste that you've walked by every day for 3 years and suddenly going, oh, wait a minute, that could be different. That could be better. And it's seeing the waste that's the hard part. And so they had looked in their waste dumpster before, and they had seen quilting transition waste. It's like, well, that's just part of the business. That's just the way it is. We've always done it like that. And they had their quality lead said, well, you know, it doesn't have to be that way. It's not that we're going to completely eliminate transition waste. That part is necessary. But we could still reduce it. So they saw a waste and they recognized it as a variable waste, not an inevitable waste. And then they just made some recordings. They made a few observations. It's data if you write it down, so you know it's a little bit different. And they recorded that data, and that just gave them a way of exploring the topic. And maybe what they explored was like, you know what? Operators already got it dialed in. We don't need to change anything. But you don't know until you record. There we go. And then what they did is they made it a game. They made it like challenge your team to beat the high score. Like, how can we do better than we did last week? Okay, how about the week after? Can we do that? And in doing so, they celebrated successes and they made it a positive thing. They made it an achievement instead of here's the standard. What you just did was a defect, so knock it off. So it was very, very much a matter of tone and approach that they did very well. So that's reducing quilting transition waste.